In a Nuzlocke, any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, and the best way to experience a new generation is only using the brand new Pokemon. And much like every generation before, we have to decide on our starter. Will we pick the adorable flower kitten, or the derpy but spicy crocodile? No way, Jose, we're rolling with this mother ducker. And right off the bat, Quaxly handles Nemona's Fuecoco with ease with its modest nature powering up its water gun. And I was pretty pleased with getting such an awesome nature for our first Pokemon, which was before I learned it's a physical attacker. Heading on to Poco Path, the first new Pokemon I find is Lechonk. And shortly after catching the Oinkinator, I find myself a Tarantula. Now, normally in a Nuzlocke, you only get to catch the first Pokemon you find in every area, but since the areas in the vast Paldea region are difficult to define and mostly unknown to me, I decided that I get to catch one Pokemon from each new evolution line I can find, regardless of the area. This means the Poco Path had one more encounter to offer me, Palmy, the electric type. It's then here that I meet my new bicycle that's so conveniently washed up to shore. Eagerly making my way to the academy, I then accidentally run into Paldean Wooper. And despite its fecal resemblance, Poison Point is actually a really awesome ability to have on the team. And speaking of accidental encounters, as I did a bit more exploring, I was attacked by a wild Flamigo. This thing is a flying fighting type with 115 base attack? You are my new favorite. Before we're allowed entry to Mesa Goza, we have to take on Nemona once again. And apart from her Fuecoco, which again gets ducked by a water gun, this time she also has a Palmy. We obviously can't keep our water starter in versus this electric type, so I swap out into my ground type Pooper. It's here that we get our first taste of terastallization, but Thundershock still can't hurt Pooper. So an acid spray to lower Palmy's special defense followed up by a mud shot seals the deal. Before we can take on the first gym, we have to do the 20 FPS olive roll. I seriously have no idea what this has to do with Pokemon battling, but I passed. This means it's finally time to take on the first gym leader, Katie, who uses bug types. Leading with the new bug Pokemon Nimble, I send in my Flamigo, who easily destroys both it and the incoming Tarantula. This just leaves our final Pokemon, Teddy Ursa? Yeah, with terastallization, the game developers basically have free reign to give these gym leaders any Pokemon they want, since they can Terra into whatever type they need to be. And because of Teddy Ursa's newfound bug type, Flamigo can slap it down into the red with a wing attack and then get hit by a Fury Swipes. I easily outspeed with Flamigo's stellar 90 base speed and can take it out with another wing attack. I mean, I expected the first gym to be easy, but Flamigo really made that a walk in the park. Moving on, I run into a wild Knackley. Is this thing a Super Mario power-up from Minecraft? However, more importantly, when I turn this corner, I run into a Pokemon I'd never seen before, a Charcadet. Now, I felt really lucky having found this guy, and even luckier that it had an adamant nature. What's that? It's a special attacker? I wish I could get a good nature just once. But now's no time to mope around, because after defeating this trainer, Quaxly evolves into Quaxwell. I'm beginning to regret this decision. Something I don't regret, however, is running into a Squawkabilly outside of Artisan. Not only does it have Intimidate, which is possibly the best ability in the game, just look at its base stats. 96 base attack paired with 92 speed is a very welcome addition to the team. This town's gym mission is to find all the 3 FPS Sunfloras. And I'll be honest, it made me physically ill. But after enduring that bit of pain, we get to challenge the second gym leader, Brassius, and his grass types. He leads with Petalil, after which I learned that Own Tempo now nullifies Intimidate. But regardless, the Petalil of course falls to a single stab Aerial Ace. As Brassius then sends in his Smoliv, I realize that it's probably better to have Intimidate in the back to be able to switch into in case I need it, so I go ahead and swap out into my Flamigo. A Tackle barely does any damage on the switch, and I can turn this Smoliv into Tapenade the next turn with a wing attack. In comes Brassius' final Pokemon Sudowoodo as I decide to Terastallize, but I thought I'd turn it into a flying type, but it turns out my Terra type is fighting. This isn't the end of the world, but Sudowoodo tearing into a grass type does mean it does neutral damage since I lost my flying. Being completely new to Terastallization at this point, I completely forgot that it's only a grass type and go for a double kick, which does some pretty pathetic neutral damage. Sudowoodo hits me with the new move Trailblaze that hits me pretty hard for neutral damage and boosts its own speed. I am still faster the next turn, however, learning from my mistake and going for wing attack, leaving it in the yellow as it goes for another Trailblaze, raising its speed yet again. At this point, Sudowoodo will outspeed me and take me out with another Trailblaze, so I have to swap out into my Squawkabilly, who can lower the Sudowoodo's attack with Intimidate on the switch. I then get hit by a Trailblaze again, but since it's resisted due to Squawkabilly's flying type, it barely does any damage at all. The next turn, Sudowoodo goes for Rock Throw, but after Intimidate and since it's not Stab anymore, it doesn't do too much damage and I can finish off the Sudowoodo with an Aerial Ace. If you ask me, they should have given Sudowoodo a Grass Rock evolution, but honestly, it tearing into a Grass type in this fight is pretty amazing as well. After the gym, I do some exploring, and what is that? Now, I didn't pay too much attention to the trailers, so I kinda accidentally walked into this Titan fight. And I will say I was incredibly lucky that I had Squawkabilly in the front so I could get off an Intimidate right away and then instantly swap out into my Flamigo. And I'm incredibly glad that I swapped out right away since Cloth goes for block, not allowing me to swap out, and I actually just one-shot the entire phase with a low kick. From there I had to chase it down to take on its second phase, but since this is a double battle with Arven and I know what I'm up against, it was a lot easier to just use the same strategy and low kick it into oblivion. So far, what's pretty much become my team of birds is absolutely killing it. And speaking of killing, I then went on a side mission to take out some Bronzor for their drops. And while leveling up, Pawmi evolves into Pawmo, that's its actual name, okay. I then from a distance spot and hunt down a Cyclizar, the dragon and normal type. And once again, we found ourselves a standalone Pokemon with absolute stellar stats to add to the team. Speaking of which, I also find myself a Cloth before I take out the rest of the Bronzor I need. The reason I did this is because this gentleman I ran across is offering a trade of 10 Bronzor fragments for some auspicious armor. And we can use said auspicious armor essentially as an evolution stone to evolve Charcadet into Armorogue. Now that's what I call a team member. From there, we can also level up to evolve Pooper, and I was just kidding with the name, but it really does turn into a turd, huh? Arriving in Levincia, we have to complete the gym challenge, which is starring in one of Iono's streams? Imagine actually streaming ever. Hello, hello, hola, ciao, and bonjour.
I am a Spanish genius!
Unfortunately for my team of mostly birds, Iono is an electric-type gym leader. What I do have, however, is Clodsire, who after getting hit by a Pluck, proccing its Poison Point ability and poisoning the Wattrel, can set up the first layer of Toxic Spikes. I then get hit by another Pluck, allowing me to set up the second layer of Spikes. Another few Plucks then get Pooper really low, but at least he can take out the Wattrel with a Poison Tail. Next out is Bellybolt, which kinda looks like Kermit the Frog at a kid with an avocado. With the knowledge that this thing's never gonna go for an electric-type move versus my ground type, I swap out into Squawkabilly, who tanks a water gun. It doesn't do too much damage, and the best part about this is that Squawkabilly's flying type is gonna bait out another electric move, so we can easily just swap back to Clodsire, who's immune to it. Now this maneuver in and of itself isn't particularly valuable if it weren't for the Toxic Spikes that we set up earlier. However, because it's poison, Bellybolt keeps taking more and more damage until its eventual demise. Iono's third Pokemon, Luxio, also gets badly poisoned on the switch-in and intimidates me to lower my attack. Clodsire is at way too low health to tank anything here, so I go ahead and swap out into my Bike Dragon, who tanks a bite easily. I then outspeed the next turn, getting a critical hit Breaking Swipe, taking Luxio deep into the red and lowering its attack so that Bite does barely any damage at all before it falls to poison. And this is the point when I learned that Iono's final Pokemon is a Mismagius that she terastallizes into an electric type, which synergizes great with its Levitate ability since it now has no weaknesses. To my surprise, however, Breaking Swipe does a fair amount of damage, looking like a 3-hit KO before Mismagius confuses me. I don't really want to gamble with confusion, so I go ahead and swap out, expecting an electric type move since she can't hit me with Ghost, so I swap in Pooper. This is an excellent showcase of how important immunities can be in a Nuzlocke. Since I'm now expecting a Ghost move, I can easily swap back into my normal type to get rid of confusion and dodge the Hex. Expecting I'm gonna have to do the same dance here and swap out, I go for another Breaking Swipe, taking Mismagius deep into the yellow, as it just goes for a Charge Beam, which doesn't even raise its special attack. This means another Breaking Swipe can easily take it out, granting me the best streamer ever badge. After leaving Levincia behind, I run into a pack of Tauruses? Torai? Either way, this gave me an excellent opportunity to add another Intimidator to the team. Following this, I went on a bit of an exploration spree, first off finding a Scovillain, but it was a little bit too high level, so I'm not gonna get to use it yet. Getting a bit overzealous and trying to make this jump, I fell into this endless hole. Oh, you don't take fall damage. Well, that was overdramatic. But honestly, I'm glad I fell down here, since making my way back up, I managed to encounter a Frigibax. This little guy is a brand new awesome dragon ice type, but being level 35, I'm not quite allowed to use it yet. I also found this ice city at the top of the mountain, but the gym seems a little bit strong to take on, so I move on to something a little bit more my speed. Except as soon as I run into Kofu, he runs away from me. Whoa, this man's Unibrow's got a Unibrow. That's like a Tuna Brow. And Tuna is the name of the game, since this guy's a water-type gym leader and starts out with the new Pokemon Veluza. I lead with my Tauros to get an Intimidate off as Veluza breaks the mold. I expect Veluza to be a physical attacker, so I go ahead and swap out into my best wall Pooper as it goes for Pluck, so it's pretty good that I swapped out, otherwise I'd be victim to super effective damage, and I managed to get Pooper's poison point off. From there, much like versus Iono, I did a bit of switching back and forth to get as much poison damage as possible before swapping in Mother Ducker, who gets hit by an Aqua Cutter on the switch. The next turn I get hit by a Slash before I can boost my attack and special attack with Workup. I do the same thing again the next turn, hoping that Veluza goes down to poison, but it's not quite enough, meaning that Mother Ducker gets taken down into the yellow before Veluza goes down to the poison. While this does put me at +3 special attack, I'd rather be at +2 with more health since I don't know what I'm about to face, which happens to be a Wug Trio. And of course the Wug Trio outspeeds me the next turn, taking me down to 16 HP with a headbutt. I don't flinch however, but an Air Slash at +3 isn't even enough to take it out, so I'm forced to swap out into my Cyclizar. And Cyclizar can't tank the headbutt on the switch particularly well either, but at least I can outspeed the next turn, taking out the Wug Trio with a Breaking Swipe, activating its GUI, and lowering my speed in the process. Kofu now only has his final Pokemon, Crabominable, which much like Sudowoodo, terrestrializes into a type that it probably should have been to begin with, Water. Not sure what Crabominable is going to hit me with, I decide to go for U-turn, swapping out into Tauros to get an Intimidate off and lower its attack. Crabominable ends up going for a super effective Rock Smash that doesn't do too much because of the Intimidate, however it does get the defense drop, so I'm forced to swap out again and go into my Flamingo. But the switch to Flamigo isn't that great for me since a Crabhammer does way over half. To my surprise however, Flamigo has an Oran Berry that I equipped in the early game that takes it just above half. My team is looking pretty roughed up and there's nothing I really want to swap into a Crabhammer. So I decide to stay in and see if Flamigo can tank it, however, it's not quite enough and we lose our first Pokemon of the run. Since my team's in pretty bad shape, I decide to send in Tauros first to lower Crabominable's attack further with an Intimidate and then go ahead and swap back out into Cyclizar. It even manages to dodge the Crabhammer on the switch, then outspeed with a Breaking Swipe, lowering Crabominable's attack further. The following Rock Smash does do a decent chunk, however, and lowers my defense, so I decide to swap in Tauros again to get another Intimidate. Tauros does take a Rock Smash on the switch and gets its defense lowered, but it barely does anything now that Crabominable barely has any attack, so I decide to swap out into Palmo, who does have to eat a Crabhammer on the switch, but it doesn't even do half now that we've lowered Crabominable's attack so much, so I can easily just Terrastalize into Electric type and take the Crabominable out with a Spark. After claiming the Cascarapa Gym Badge, I do a bit more exploring and once again accidentally run into a Titan. I seem to have been way overleveled for this fight, however, since it just goes down to a single Terrastalized Rock Tomb. And with the level cap before the 5th gym at 36, we can finally get Quaxly to its 2nd stage evolution, and oh goodness, what the duck am I looking at? The 5th gym is normal type and inside of a restaurant, which I'm sure Gordon Ramsay wouldn't be too happy about.
She's not normal.
I start out by sending in Mother Ducker and going for a workup to boost my attack and special attack as I get hit by a Yawn from Kamala. The following turn, I go for another workup to set up more boost as Kamala hits me with a Slam, which does a lot of damage, leaving me at 64 health before I go to sleep at the end of the turn. However, being prepared for this one, my duck is holding a Chesto Berry, allowing it to wake up and take out the Kamala with a low sweep the next turn. Wait, no, this is the new Dunsparce evolution?
Look how they mess with my boy.
Get this thing out of here now! This just leaves Larry's final Pokemon Staraptor, so I swap into Tauros to get an Intimidate before it terras into a normal type. I then get hit with an Aerial Ace, which doesn't even do half since it isn't stab anymore, so I go ahead and stay in and survive a second one on 12 HP and get off a super effective double kick before I have to swap out. Knowing it's gonna go for another Aerial Ace here, I can safely send in Cloth, who can tank it very well since it's resisted. Cloth then outspeeds with its Quick Claw, going for a Rock Smash, doing about half of Staraptor's remaining health and getting a defense drop before I get hit by a Facade, which barely does any damage at all. Without a Quick Claw proc, Staraptor outspeeds the next turn, hitting Cloth with a Facade, taking it below half, which actually activates its Anger Shell ability, boosting both its attack, special attack, and speed, and lowering its defenses. And because of the prior defense drop, I didn't even need that boost to take out the Staraptor and claim the 5th gym badge. After the gym fight, we have to take on Nimona, but she was dumb enough to take on Mother Ducker in the rain. You could have just waited like 5 minutes. Taking one look at our team, it is loaded with fighting types, so I decided to try and find some new encounters since the next gym is Ghost. In doing so, I managed to catch a Kilowattrel, but since it's at level 47, we're not going to be able to use it for a while. And speaking of Pokemon we haven't been able to use, while doing a bit of grinding, Frigibax leveled up and evolved into Arctibax. Hold on a minute, I'm here for a rap battle? I rap what's in my soul, baby. Weaving words into a symphony of poetry. Don't try it with me, you won't last one round. I'm like a Sableye, I mean, look, I'll lock you down. Fine, Rhyme, but you're the one who asked for this. They call me Antler Boy, cause my bars are live. Your rhyme's as dead as your Pokemon, you might need a revive. You know my flow's on fire. I hit like I'm a champ with guts, so I'ma ride this beat to victory. And you can ride on these nuts. Yeah, you can decide who won in the comments. The only way to truly settle this dispute is with a Pokemon battle, and of course it has to be a double battle. I decide to lead with Tauros and Cyclizar so that I have a normal type and can get Intimidate to lower their attack. I then go for Breaking Swipe, which of course doesn't hit Mimikyu since it's a fairy type, however I can hit Banette to lower its attack a bit more. Tauros then goes for Assurance just to break Mimikyu's disguise. Cyclizar then gets hit by a pretty weak slash from Mimikyu as the Banette actually goes for Icy Wind, lowering the speed of both my Pokemon, but not doing too much damage since it's a spread move and Banette doesn't have the best special attack. However, because of the speed drop, Mimikyu gets to hit me first, and I can't use Shed Tail because I have less than half health, so I'll have to just settle for taking out Banette with Tauros instead. Rhyme then sends in a Houndstone, and apparently since we knocked out a Pokemon, the crowd starts cheering, and both Aquarius and Tandem get attack and special attack boosts. Mimikyu then hits Tauros with a slash, and honestly, I should have probably just swapped out Cyclizar here instead of going for U-turn since it goes after Mimikyu anyway. Expecting Houndstone to go for a super effective Play Rough against either of my Mons, I send in Habanero and it works out beautifully since it's a resisted hit. Houndstone then takes over half from Assurance, but to my surprise, the crowd starts cheering for Rhyme now, boosting both of her Pokemon's speed. This means that both of them are faster than my Pokemon, and they hit Tauros with both Slash and Play Rough, but to my surprise, it doesn't even go down, left at 20 HP, which is when I make a terrible mistake. You see, Habanero has the move Spicy Extract, and what I thought it did is boost my attack and lower Mimikyu's defense, but apparently it boosts both Mimikyu's attack and lowers its defense. The only good thing to come out of this turn is that Tauros takes out the Houndstone with another Assurance. Rhyme then sends in her final Pokemon Toxtricity, and the crowd goes wild, giving both of my Pokemon another attack and special attack boost. Being at such low health, I decide to swap out Tauros for Clodsire, perhaps even getting another Intimidate use out of it. Her Toxtricity then terrestrializes into a Ghost type as Mimikyu hits Pooper with a Slash, which activates Poison Point. Mimikyu is a massive threat with +2 attack and +1 speed, so I'm really glad I can get rid of it with a Crunch from Habanero. But if you thought that Mimikyu got dicey, the crowd starts cheering for terrestrialization, giving Toxtricity a boost to every single one of its stats. This allows it to outspeed the next turn, annihilating Habanero with a Hyper Voice and just allowing Clodsire to live barely in the red so that it can pull off a Toxic. I go ahead and send in Cloth, but because Rhyme took out one of my Pokemon, the crowd goes wild, giving the Toxtricity an accuracy boost. From there, I terrestrialize Cloth and try to go for a Rock Slide, but unfortunately I miss. And because of that miss, Pooper gets absolutely destroyed by a Hyper Voice. So I go ahead and send in Tandem, but because I terrestrialize, my Pokemon gets a boost to all its stats now as well. I then go for a U-turn with Cyclizar, which ends up being super pathetic chip damage so that I can swap out into Tauros to get an Intimidate, but that doesn't really matter since this thing is a pure special attacker. This unfortunately means that Tauros is swapped right into a Hyper Voice, and it goes down as well. Ironically, this activates Cloth's Anger Shell ability, boosting its attack further, but my Rock Slide doesn't quite get the KO. However, with Pooper's Poison, it's enough to take out the Toxtricity and claim the 6th gym badge. To get to my next destination, I had to traverse the dangerous cliffsides of Paldea, and once I got to the next gym, I had another chance encounter with Nemona. And since we've faced her a few times before, I thought that I was ready for this. Oh, but I wasn't. To begin with, I was feeling very confident, going for Shed Tail with Tandem, passing the substitute onto Mother Ducker. From there, a resisted Rock Slide doesn't even break the sub. Another Rock Slide, however, is enough to break the sub, but this gives me a free opportunity to set up a workup. I decide to go for another workup here, however, the next Rock Slide ends up flinching me, so I don't really want to try my luck. The Lycanroc then goes for Sand Attack, lowering Mother Ducker's accuracy, but I do at least get to hit the Aqua Step, taking it out in one hit. Palmot then gets absolutely bodied by Aqua Step as well, and Nemona sends in her Sliggoo. I go for an Acrobatics, but it doesn't quite take out the Sliggoo, which goes for Dragon Pulse, leaving me in the yellow. Another Acrobatics is enough to take out the Sliggoo, which means she sends in her final Pokemon, Terrestrialized Skeledirge. This should be fine, however. We're at +2 speed, so we're guaranteed to outspeed this thing, and at +1, we should take it out in one hit. Excuse me, what? Now, even though we resist this hit, Double Stab Torch Song is still going to be enough to take out the rest of our health, and thus our starter. Goodbye, Mother Ducker. It's been an absolute pleasure. From there, however, since Skeledirge is at such low health, we can just send in our fastest Pokemon tandem and take it out with a Breaking Swipe. This means I'm now in desperate need of a new team member, but right outside the Psychic Gym town, I managed to find myself a Lokix. A bug dark type right outside the Psychic Gym? It's like it was meant to be. And so it seemed I had my entire strategy figured out for the next gym leader, the Psychic type user Tulip. As she sends in Farigiraf, I instantly go for a Shed Tail, passing a substitute over to Lokix. Farigiraf then perfectly goes for a Zen Headbutt, which of course doesn't affect our Dark type. The next turn I go for a Throat Chop, which isn't enough to take out the Farigiraf, however, its crunch doesn't even break our substitutes. And from there, another Throat Chop is enough to take out the Farigiraf. Tulip's second Pokemon is a Gardevoir, and with its Fairy typing, it nullifies both of my stabs. So I go for a Throat Chop, which doesn't quite do half, as Gardevoir hits me with a Dazzling Gleam that finally breaks my substitute. Since you get double stab if you Terra into one of your original types, I Terrasilize into a Bug type, which is going to allow me to take out the Gardevoir with a Bug Bite. Her next Pokemon is Espathra, which does outspeed us and can hit with a Psychic since we're now only a Bug type. However, Lokix ends up surviving since we're at full health, and another Bug Bite is enough to take it out. Her final Pokemon is Psychic Terraflorges, but since that thing is a special wall and has barely any physical defense, we can just take it out in one shot as well, claiming us the 7th gym badge. At this stage in the game, I've finally learned how to evolve Pawmo, and it turns out I just needed to take a long walk, level it up, and it evolves into Pawmot. And from there, we can take on the final gym leader fight versus Grusha and her ice types. She leads out with Frostmoth as I send in Tandem and immediately Shed Tail out into Armorogue. Frostmoth then hits me with a Blizzard, and since it's a really powerful move, it does end up breaking the substitute. From there, I go ahead and Terrastalize into a Fire type and use Calm Mind to boost my special attack and special defense as the Frostmoth goes for Tailwind, boosting its team's speed. The next turn, Frostmoth of course outspeeds because of Tailwind, but ends up missing its Blizzard, so I get to set up another Calm Mind. And after 2 Calm Minds, Blizzard barely does anything, allowing me to set up the third. At this point, I'm sitting super comfortably at +3, and Frostmoth can only hurt me with not very effective moves, but I go for the 4th Calm Mind here because I'm just waiting out the Tailwind so that the rest of his team doesn't outspeed me. From there, I can go for +4 Flamethrower, which is easily enough to take out Frostmoth, Beartic, and Satitan in one shot. Her final Pokemon is a Terra Altaria, which is faster than Armorogue since it's got 5 points of base speed on it. However, it just ends up missing a Hurricane, allowing me to take it out, claiming the final gym badge. All that's left is to take on the Pokemon League. And to do so, we're gonna need to make some team preparations. And my first order of business was capturing a Primeape. Secondly, I made sure to go out of my way and catch myself a Bisharp. Now, neither of these are new Pokemon. However, after taking out 3 particular wild Bisharps with my own, Samurai evolves into King Gambit. I then had to annihilate the entire early game population of Pokemon with Rage Fist until Primeape evolved into Annihilape. From there, I made sure to backtrack to Delibird Presents to pick up some awesome battle items like the Choice Scarf for $100,000. Then finally, I made sure to get Arctobax to level 54, evolving it into this generation's pseudo-legendary Baxcalibur. And so, my final team consists of Samurai the King Gambit, Nightmare the Armorogue, Zippy the Kilowattrel, Kong the Annihilape, Tandem the Cyclozar, and Rex the Baxcalibur. And the first Elite Four member we have to go up against is Rika with her ground types. She leads the fight with a Whiscash as I send in Tandem. I go for Trailblaze hoping it'll KO, being quad effective, but it doesn't quite, raising my speed, but then I manage to dodge a Blizzard. I'm not really sure Tandem should be alive at this point, but I'll take what I can get and knock out the Whiscash with another Trailblaze. Her second Pokemon is then Donphan, so I go for Shed Tail, swapping out into Rex. I do end up getting hit by an Earthquake on the switch, but since I've got a substitute, it takes the damage for me and fades away. I then go for a stab Ice Fang, but with Donphan's massive defense, it just does about 60% as it then hits me with a Stone Edge. Rex with his massive bulk shrugs it off like nothing and then takes out Donphan with another Ice Fang. Rika's next Pokemon is Camerupt, so I decide to swap out of Rex and send in Nightmare. However, I should have probably stayed in since it just ends up going for Yawn anyway. I then go for a Calm Mind to boost my special defense, foolishly thinking that I could live through a bunch of hits as I fall asleep, but as you can see, the Camerupt's Earth Power does massive damage here and lowers my special defense, so I can't even take another. Expecting another, however, I can easily just swap out a Nightmare into Zippy, who can dodge it with its flying type. I try to get some damage on this thing, but Dual Wing Beat is my only option, which does some pretty pathetic damage before the Camerupt goes for Yawn. I then then get a little bit more chip damage with dual wing beat as the Camerupt hits me with a Fire Blast for massive damage, leaving Zippy in the red as I then fall asleep. Expecting yet another Fire Blast, I decide to swap out of Zippy and send in Tandem, but once again, Tandem dodges the low accuracy move. From there, all I have to do is click Ice Spinner, which isn't super effective, but still takes out the Camerupt, sending in Rika's Dugtrio. However, Dugtrio isn't exactly known for its defense, and since I have one more point of base speed and speed investment, I can take it out in one hit. Rika then terastallizes her Clodsire as I go for Shedtail, swapping out into Rex. Clodsire then perfectly goes for Toxic on the switch, which can't affect me behind a substitute. From there, a couple of Ice Fangs is enough to beat Clodsire, taking care of Rika, which means we have to go up against the second Elite Four member, the Steel-type user Poppy. She leads out with Caparaja, which gives me the perfect opportunity to send in Nightmare, who after terastallizing can easily take out Caparaja with a Wiseglass boosted Flamethrower, and both her Bronzong and Corviknight share the same fate before she sends in her Magnezone. I still go for the Flamethrower here, knowing that it's got Sturdy, surviving on 1 HP no matter what, even though I do get a critical hit as it just sets up a light screen. I then destroy it with another Flamethrower, which means Poppy sends in her final Pokemon, Terastallized Tinkaton. Because Armorogue's defense is awesome, I tank a critical hit Stone Edge and go for a Flamethrower, which doesn't do too much even though it's super effective due to light screen. And so expecting Poppy to fish for another crit with Stone Edge, I send in Samurai, to whom Stone Edge does barely anything at all. I'm now expecting her to go for the quad effective Brick Break, so I send in the Ghost type Annihilate, who can dodge it with its immunity. Annihilate actually has pretty decent defense for a Ghost type, allowing it to survive a Gigaton Hammer, which lets us take out the Tinkaton's remaining health with a critical hit close combat. Third out is Elite Four member Larry, who's ditched his normal types in favor of flying types, leading with Tropius as I send in Rex. I'm not exactly sure what compels an Elite Four member to bring a Tropius, but we take care of it with a quad effective Ice Fang. Larry then sends in Staraptor, which nerfs us with Intimidate. I really don't want to be the victim of a close combat here, so I decide to swap out into Kong, who can dodge it with its Ghost type. Since Annihilate is a fighting type, however, this is going to bait out a Brave Bird, so we can easily send in Samurai, who doesn't take too much damage from it, and if we just repeat this process 5 times, Staraptor is going to be completely out of close combats, and thus not quite as dangerous to Rex. Brave Bird still does an impressive amount of damage on the switch, but since I'm holding a Choice Scarf, it's not going to get to attack again as I take it out with an Ice Fang. Same then goes for Altaria and Oricorio, which only leaves his final Pokemon Flamigo. And while my Ice Fang doesn't quite manage to take it out, I do end up getting a lucky freeze, allowing me to take it out the next turn. The final member of the Elite Four is the Dragon Master himself, Hassel, and he really wasn't that much of a hassle to deal with. You see, with a Choice Scarf, Rex outspeeds every single one of his Pokemon and can just one-shot them with Glaive Rush, a 120 base power Dragon type move. Pair that with Stab and Baxcalibur's crazy 145 base attack stat, and well, you've got a pretty easy fight on your hands. At this point, we've made it all the way, and I know this game is a little bit confusing. Nemona tells you she's a champion right off the bat, and there are multiple champions, but only one champion can be the best, so we're challenging the top champion, La Primera. It's time to face Champion Geeta. With a full team of 6, I'm ready for her to do her worst, as she starts out with Espathra and I send in Nightmare. She outspeeds me right off the bat, going for a resisted Lumina Crash, which doesn't do too much, but it lowers my special defense harshly as I retaliate with a Shadow Ball that does over half. The next turn, Lumina Crash does substantially more damage, leaving me at 98 HP in the yellow as another Shadow Ball takes out the Espathra. Since the next Pokemon in her team order that has a super effective move against Nightmare is Avalugg, she sends it in as I decide to Terastallize and eviscerate this thing with a Flamethrower. This means she sends in a King Gambit of her own, which activates its ability Supreme Overlord, powering it up for every one of her felled Pokemon, but since it's so slow, it too just gets annihilated by a Flamethrower. From there, she does what she probably should have done in the first place and sends in Veluza, forcing me to swap out. Expecting the obvious Water-type move, I swap into Rex, who resists it, and despite it being a critical hit, it barely does anything because of Rex's awesome defense. I then do some amazing damage with Crunch, as another critical hit from Psycho Cut barely does anything at all, and a second Crunch deals with Veluza. Geeta's next Pokemon is Go-Goat, and since this thing has Play Rough, I see it as a perfect opportunity to swap back out into Nightmare. However, the Go-Goat just ends up setting up its attack and defense with Bulk Up, so I incinerate it the next turn turn with a flamethrower. This means Geeta only has one Pokemon left, the new Glimmora. I really don't want to take an Earth Power or a Rock-type Terra Blast to the face, so I go ahead and swap out into Samurai as it terastallizes and unfortunately goes for Earth Power over the Terra Blast. This does a bit over half to Samurai, but now that we're expecting another one, we can easily swap out into Zippy, who can dodge it with its flying type. The following turn, I fish for Paralysis with Discharge, but I unfortunately don't end up getting it, as the Glimmora then goes for a Terra Blast, which leaves me at 1 HP because of my Focus Sash. I then go for a Volt Switch the next turn to do a little bit of chip damage before I swap out into Samurai. And I do end up surviving the Dazzling Gleam on the switch in, but that's a short-lived victory since it just takes me out with an Earth Power the next turn. After this, I make a bit of an unnecessary play, sending in Tandem and going for Shed Tail to get in Rex for free, as it then takes out my sub with a Terra Blast. I mean, honestly, I could have just swapped in Rex for free instead of Cyclizar in the first place, because the next turn, my Choice Scarf allows me to outspeed, taking out the Glimmora with a Glaive Rush, and to celebrate my grand victory, Glimmora showers me with Toxic Spikes through its ability. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I became the top What? Nemona wants to challenge me again to be the best champion? Well, in that case, this one's for you, Mother Ducker. We may only have 5 Pokemon left on our team, and she took our most precious team member the last time, so it could be a tough fight, but I aim to prevail. Her Lycanroc takes the first turn to set up Stealth Rocks, as I then take it out with a close combat. Her second Pokemon is a Pawmot, so expecting it to go for an Electric-type move here, I go ahead and swap out into Zippy, whose Focus Sash is broken by the Stealth Rocks. However, the Electric-type move plus Volt Switch takes me back to full health. I then go for Dual Wing Beat, which is neutral, but it does some pretty pathetic damage as I get hit by an Ice Punch, which doesn't even take me down to my Sash. But it does freeze me, which I guess is karma from before. Since I can at least use Zippy as switch fodder if I swap out, I go ahead and swap into Rex as Pawmot goes for Quick Attack. I can then easily take it out with a Glaive Rush as Nemona sends in my arch nemesis, the Dunsparce. Since Glaive Rush makes it so the next move the opponent uses has double power, I might as well take this opportunity to sack off Zippy in order to negate that effect. This is going to allow me to freely get in Kong and take out the Dunsparce once and for all with a close combat. Nemona then sends in Earthworm. And since my defenses have been dropped by close combat, I decide to swap out into Nightmare. Armorogue can easily tank an Iron Tail on the switch and then retaliate the next turn with a Flamethrower, taking out Earthworm. This leads Nemona to send in her pseudo-legendary Goodra, and expecting a Muddy Water here, I go ahead and swap into my own, and since Rex resists it, the Muddy Water barely does anything at all. I can then easily take out the Goodra with Glaive Rush, which leaves Nemona with only one Pokemon left, the one that took everything from me. Since Skeledirge is going to do double damage after Glaive Rush this turn, I decide to swap out into Tandem as it terastallizes and hits me with a Torch Song. This boosts its special attack, and I decide to get as much chip damage with Dragon Claw as I can before being taken out by Earth Power. I next send in Kong, who after being hurt by Stealth Rocks can go for a Stomping Tantrum, but it's not quite enough to take the Skeledirge out. It then hits me with a +1 Shadow Ball, which is easily enough to take out my Annihilate. With only 2 Pokemon left to my name, I send in Rex, who survives the Stealth Rock with 13 HP and can finish off the Skeledirge with a Glaive Rush. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I beat my first ever Pokemon Scarlet playthrough as a Hardcore Nuzlocke using only the new Pokemon. And honestly, I had a great time with it. A lot of these new Pokemon are super fun to use and have great designs, and though it was choppy at times, I would still call it an amazing experience. And make sure you comment down below which type of run you would like to see next in this game. There's a lot of Scarlet and Violet content coming to the channel, so make sure to subscribe, and if not, do ride on these nuts.